Thank you very much for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here. As Mauro said, I'm a senior editor in Nature Communications, and this is basically the view from my office. We have an office in New York, obviously. As you can see, the Statue of Liberty. And as Mauro already told you, my background is quite diverse. I graduated from the University of Belgrade in molecular biology and physiology, and then I moved to Mauro's lab, and I did my PhD with Mauro, identifying human origins of replication. And then he sent me to a conference in Cold Spring Harbor. So I actually went to New York, fell in love with that city, and decided to go there and pursue my career there, where I ended up in Dan Rifkin's lab, working actually in cell biology and TGF-beta. That was intended. What actually happened was that, as Mauro mentioned, I made a knockout mouse. Actually, I made and analyzed several of them. They all had cardiovascular defects. So I started studying cardiovascular system and heart development in particular. And then I stayed with Dan for a number of years and became a faculty member at NYU. And then I moved to Mount Sinai studying molecular mechanisms of aortic aneurysm, so cardiovascular research. And then I joined Nature Communications in 2014 as an associate editor, and ever since I've been handling cardiovascular papers on cardiovascular regeneration, physiology, and disease. And when I started, we were a smaller team. I was one of the first editors hired in New York, in the New York office. I handled also other subjects because during my tenure at NYU, I actually studied other organ systems such as lung, kidney, and so on. So this is just to let you know that you never know where your career or where your project will take you. So you might start, as I did, as a molecular biologist and then end up with molecular pathology. You never know, but it was a great experience, and it's very, very useful for what I do now in reading and handling papers. So I guess you're all familiar with this structure. I work for Nature Communications, and we belong to the Nature family of journals, which has some sort of a pyramidal organization. As you can see, we have, do I have a pointer here? Yeah. We have Nature at the top. And then we have Nature research journals in the middle tier. And then at the bottom, or as I prefer to look at it, at the base of this pyramid, we have Nature Communications. So there are differences between these journals in selectivity and in the impact of the papers, studies published in these different journals, and also amount of copy editing that we put in every paper. My journal is open access only, and we tend to publish a lot of articles. We don't have any sort of limit as to how many papers we can publish per day, week, year. We publish whatever we deem to be, good, solid, impactful science. So we handle more papers than average editor at other research journals. So that's the reason why we put a little bit less effort into copy editing. Anyway, so what makes a Nature paper? I guess you already more or less know that only reports that show the most significant advances and have the widest applications and can be read by anyone, meaning a biology paper can be read and understood by a physicist. Something that has a very broad impact is published in Nature. As I said, significance should be readily appreciated by non-specialists. Nature also publishes certain types of papers that provide significant resource value or technical breakthrough or translational potential. So it's not just really complete studies with several animal models, the molecular mechanism completely worked out, all the alternatives completely worked out. Nature is also interested in papers like this. But what if there is an important advance in your study, but perhaps it's not really meant to be, it's not reaching people that are outside of your field, but are very important for your particular field and can be appreciated by any biologist or any life sciences scientist. So in that case, perhaps you are better off submitting your paper to Nature research journals. And we have many of them. Since the early 80s, Nature family of journals has been growing rapidly. And you can see here only some examples of Nature research journals that we have now. There are many more, and there are many more to come. I'm really happy to announce that in 2018, we are going to launch Nature Metabolism, which would be especially for the fields that I cover, cardiovascular and some metabolism, which would be, I think, a very important addition to our family of journals. What makes a Nature research journal paper? As I mentioned before, these are really exceptional papers that report the most significant advances within the discipline that it covers. The significance of these papers can be readily appreciated by non-specialists. But what if you have a paper that is a very good paper and it reports very important advances in specialist areas of research, but the appeal is preferentially to the specialist in that area. So in that case, you might want to submit your paper to us. As I said, Nature Communications is a fully open access journal. It's online only. It's fully open access since 2014. It's multidisciplinary, so we publish life sciences papers and as well physical sciences papers. So basically, our scope is very similar to that of Nature. It's just a couple of tiers below Nature. We do not have any journalistic content. There are no research, excuse me, highlights or news and views. But we have a huge team of editors that are dedicated to very, very specialist areas, or as myself, I cover only cardiovascular at the moment, blood biology and cardiovascular research. So at the moment, we are 68. We are soon to be 100. And it's the biggest team within Nature Journal's family. We have 3 offices, one in London, that's our main office. Well, still. And then in 2014, we have opened an office in New York. That's where I work. We were only 3 in April 2014 when I joined. Now we are 14. And we have offices in Shanghai, and the view from the Shanghai office is very similar to the view that I just showed you on my first slide, just without the Statue of Liberty. So yeah, we are spread on 3 different continents. Our impact factor in 2015 was 1130, well, still is 1133. It's stably around this number for for the last couple of years. We publish daily, and just to let you know how much is that, in 2015, we received 22,000 papers, published 3,500 of them, which means that we have an acceptance rate of about 15%, which is, from my personal communication with different editors and meetings, I think the highest acceptance rate that any journal has. And I think the reason for that is the fact that we are open access and online journals, so we can really publish whatever we think it's right. We don't have any limitations in space. We work really hard. Now we are also many, so I think that's the secret of this high number of acceptance rate and published papers. So what are we after. So what do we look for? New ideas, new insights, new technologies, the usual stuff. And of course, what's very important for us is that the data is of high quality and that the paper is technically sound. Basically, we look forward to, we look for papers that will excite your research community. So many people in my encounters with authors and researchers, they've heard of us, but they still do not know what our scope is and how we work. So since we are open access and online journal, they immediately think that we're like +1, meaning that we can publish anything that is technically sound. That's not true. We look for conceptual novelty, extent of scientific advance, completeness, and as a disease editor, as they usually call me in my team, we look for physiological relevance, relevance to disease, mechanistic insight, and importance or usefulness of the study being reported. So we look for important advances that are of interest to specialists in their field. That's in a nutshell. So if you want to submit your journal, submit your paper, and you're still indecisive where to go, there is no really secret formula what would be the best place or the best home for your paper, but you should perhaps step back and look at your work with different objectively, let's say, and perhaps start to think about journals that you regularly read and you more or less know what those journals publish. So that's how you know where certain journals' bar is, so where your study can be a good fit. It is very important that the research questions and the data are basically the key to your choice of the journal where you want to submit. So I just want to introduce you to this other option that the Nature Journal family offers, and that is the so-called the mega journal option as +1. Basically, we have a journal that is called Scientific Reports with a pretty high impact factor, which is around 5.5. It's an open access, online only journal that publishes really a huge amount of papers, and they are not really after novelty and significance. A lot of papers that are really technically solid, if people get scooped, which happens every day, this perhaps would be a good option for, I hope that won't happen to you, but I'm just saying this journal has a very good reputation, a solid impact factor, and they care about technical correctness, that the paper is technically correct and solid, but they don't really emphasize the novelty and significance of the work. So I just wanted to give you a taste. This is something that I do occasionally. We have this thing called master classes where we try to help especially young researchers and PhD students and postdocs in how to write a paper, how to approach to writing a paper. So I'm sure that many of you do not really need this, but some people find it useful. So when you write a paper, there are several very, very simple rules, and one of them is explain, don't hype, and another one is show, don't tell, which means basically be very brief, concise, accurate, and do not oversell your work. That's a really big sort of, no one likes it. The editors do not like it, the referees do not like it. We know that you're excited about your work, but you should be realistic and do not really hype. Show, that means we want to see your results. We want to see all of them. You can have them in your main text, you can have them in the supplementary data, but for example, in my journal, data not shown is a big no-no. So we want to see your results. So please show them all, show all of them that are pertinent to your story. You should be focused, so you should have in mind before you start writing what is the one most important thing about your study and what is the take-home message about your study. You should also be aware of the significance of your work and how does it fit in the context of what's known about the subject that you work on. So you have to be aware. The best thing to actually write, I think, an introduction is to provide a short history, not history, but a short overview of the literature that sets the stage for your own work. And then the crucial point is to identify the gap in knowledge, so what hasn't been shown so far and how your paper actually contributes to the field and what burning issue it resolves or what advance it brings. So we like to think that writing a paper is really simple. You should just stick to these 3 rules. The ABC of writing, which means accurate, brief, and clear. But from my personal experience, that's really, really rare. So what does accuracy mean? I've given here an example of an abstract that this is an abstract of a paper that I published. So it is a very, very nice paper, but this is an excerpt from the abstract. So when I say accuracy, I mean this. So we really, if something is really significantly better than other things, that's not something you want in your abstract. You want hard facts, you want numbers, and you want something really accurate. This is another example of brevity. So this complicated sentence can be said really simply like this. So you should use as few words as possible and be very, very concise. As for clarity, I think that's the most difficult thing to explain. I've seen papers where English is perfect, but the paper is completely unclear. On the other hand, I've seen papers where English is really bad, but the paper, you can follow the logic of the paper. The construction, the structure of the paper is really, really good, and there is a strong logic. And then the way that the writer leads you through their story is really simple, logical, and easy to follow. So that's much more important than the quality of your English for all of us. Most of us, as myself, we are actually not, English is not our first language, so don't get discouraged. For some time, I thought that was the main issue, why I could not become an editor. It's absolutely not an issue. What we need from you is the way you think, your scientific background, your gift to assess your own work and then the work of others, and put it in the context of what's known. So that's what we are after when we hire people. Not really the quality of your English. Of course, if you have a beautiful English, that's a big plus. But going back to clarity, this is, I think, something that's really, really a gift, and not many people are able to write really clear. So you should not use jargon. That's, I think, my main issue with papers that come especially from Europe, when people speak really good English and then write a paper in a way that it gives me a headache. So it needs a lot of corrections. These are maybe more grammar issues, but I think the most important thing is to have a very clear structure of your paper. So as I said, give us a little bit of the background, identify the gap in knowledge, tell us why your study is important, how does it fill in that gap in knowledge, and then do not put your experiments in a chronological order, but in order that makes sense, so that when I read the story, I can actually appreciate the significance of your work easily. So I know that that's difficult to explain, but I'm sure that you have at least one great teacher here, and that's Mauro Giacca, who can write papers really, really great. So submission. When you submit your paper, you've written it, and you follow the ABCs of writing, we want you to submit a cover letter. And many people think that's a useless exercise. Actually, it's not. We do read it. And it's your 10 minutes with the editor. So imagine you're pitching your paper to me and you're saying, I have this great study and this hasn't been shown, this is not known, or there is a controversy in the field. So we've shown this. So tell me about your paper in very, very few sentences. Just give me a digest of your paper. And that's what I like to read in the cover letter. Sometimes the cover letters I find much more informative than the paper itself. And we all read it. So you should, it's not just a useless exercise, and you should not just say in the cover letter, this paper has not been submitted elsewhere, and all the authors approved the content, which I find quite frequently. I would like you to tell me why you're excited about your paper. What is in your paper, in your own words, not broken into paragraphs in the results and the discussion. I just need a paragraph. Sell your paper to me. So I like reading. We all read cover letters. We also encourage you to put referee suggestions. Do not put, of course, your mentor, your friends, your relatives. Be realistic and objective. People that you think would really have the expertise to assess your paper. Also, if there is any possible conflict of interest and there are people that you want to exclude, we always respect that. But of course, do not exaggerate. Like I have had submissions with people who would exclude 20 people, which is really excessive. Basically, anyone who could disagree with them. So if there are any papers that your own papers or papers that are in some way connected to the study that's been submitted to us or to any journal, you have to identify those papers in the cover letter, and most probably the editors would ask you to submit those papers as well so that they can see the content and see if there is any overlap, or they might even ask you to send both papers to the referees just to see, to have a more balanced assessment of the paper that's submitted to us. So take some time when writing your cover letter. It's pretty important, and it can do you really good if it's written in a nice way. So all this and more you can actually get from these master classes that my company organizes on invitation, of course. If you're interested, it's a whole day sort of lecture. It's usually 2 editors that work for Nature journals family. I've done several of them. I was coupled with one Nature editor, Angela Egelhardt, who covers biochemistry, and Nature Methods editor who covers, well, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying we are sent in couples from different journals with different background, and for 8 hours you will get basically lessons on how to write a paper, what happens when you submit your paper, what is our job. The goal is that we would try to help you and teach you how to improve your chances to write a good paper that can be eventually accepted wherever you decide to send it. So if you're interested in this, you can contact this person here or contact me. I'll just forward your information, your interest. So I think this is more interesting for you. What happens after submission? Many people, myself included, I didn't know really what happens on the other side before I became an editor myself. So you usually write your paper and submit, and then you get the editorial decision, which can be peer review, which is good news, or it can be returned to the author or rejected. In my journal, we usually send out between 25% and 30% of papers. My personal statistics is 27. That's quite a lot, especially that we have also a lot of submissions, so that's quite a lot of papers being sent out. We take risks. As I said, we are not as selective as Nature and Nature research journals. So if we find value in the paper, if we like it, and we are completely aware that it's too preliminary, it doesn't really have everything that we would need to be published, we take risks. And that means we send it out, and we more or less know what the referees will tell us. But we like the story, we like the idea, so that's why we have this sort of high number of papers being sent out for peer review. So, as I mentioned, 25 to 30% of them go to peer review. So what is it that we do? We read the paper and we get back to you within a week. That's sort of what we aim for, but as I said, there are some periods that are very busy and that might be longer or even shorter when the period is good. At least one editor will assess the paper thoroughly. So if paper is on cardiovascular, it will come to me, and I will definitely read it and make comments. But then I usually consult, especially if the paper is involving other elements, will consult with someone else in my team. So Nature Communications is organized in smaller teams. My team is Metabolism and Physiology. We are 6 editors, and we all work on metabolism and physiology. We have 2 Italian editors that handle liver, pancreas, muscle, gene therapy, bone. We have 1 Australian editor that handles immunology and also some bone. A Taiwanese editor who handles immunology. I don't really know what I am, but originally from Serbia, handling cardiovascular. So we're an international team, and we handle all these different areas of physiology and disease. And our team manager handles obesity and metabolism. He's German. So the whole journal is organized in small teams that basically can be even seen as independent journals, even though we do collaborate extensively, but that's the size of, I don't know, JCI, for example, or even Nature Medicine. They don't have much, the number of editors they have is very similar to what we have in our own team. So that's how we work. So at least one editor will assess the paper and then usually consult with someone else as well. And then we make a decision. Let's continue with this paper. We don't think this has reached our bar, so we send our first decision to the authors. If we send your paper out for peer review, you will get an automated message from us, email, that says your paper has been sent to peer review, but that doesn't mean that we already have all the referees assigned, and that creates a lot of misunderstandings with our authors, because when they get that email, they think, oh, they already have all 3 referees, and the paper has been already sent to our peers for review. No, that means that we just made a decision to send it out. Sometimes it takes us days, even weeks, to find appropriate referees. As I mentioned, 20 to 40%. It depends on the area. In my area, it's around 30% of manuscripts are sent out to review, and we usually engage with 2 to 4 referees per paper. I have had examples when we had 5, but that's because we really take good care that all the technical aspects of the paper are being assessed by experts. So if you have employed single-cell RT-PCR transcriptomics, for example, and that's really many results that you then presented in your paper are based on that particular technique, we will have someone who does not necessarily have to have experience, say, in cardiovascular, but knows the technique really well, so that he or she can tell us if technically the basis of your paper is solid. So we will engage with referees that are there only for technical purposes, in addition to referees that actually can see the big picture and can see the advance that your study provides in your particular field. So how do we select reviewers? Broad knowledge of the field, as I mentioned. They have to have technical expertise as well. Fair and constructive, but this comes with experience. And this is the list of fair and constructive referees that we all keep is really precious. And when an editor leaves the company or the journal, this is something that we all want, because that means, you can go back to people that know where the bar of your journal is, that are fair and constructive, because quite often we get these reports that are perhaps poor, short, or just not, involved or objective, which is, of course, creates a problem for us, but for the authors, mostly for the authors. So coming to a decision sometimes can be really a difficult task if the reports that we received are not really great. We also like efficient referees. We all know that you as researchers are very busy, sometimes too busy. Sometimes it takes, we usually ask people to return their comments in 10 days. That rarely happens. So efficiency means please, be punctual and give us your report on time. So if the editorial decision is late, that usually means not that editor is sitting, on their butt and doing nothing, that one or several reports are really, really late, or we had difficulties recruiting referees. Of course, availability. It's very nice if you, it's fine if you decline our invitation. Just let us know. I can't do this because I'm traveling until, I don't know, December 1st. Would that be okay with you if I deliver my report December 2nd? And in many, many occasions, I say yes, because I prefer to wait longer than 10 days and have a report from someone that I really, really appreciate, and I know that that person can deliver a good report. That's good for authors as well. This is, I think, very hard to explain to the authors, and I try that very hard at conferences, because sometimes waiting is better than getting a really, really fast decision, because you might actually get a really good set of referees assessing your paper that will be very constructive and help you actually get into our journal and help you improve your paper, than something really fast and perhaps not that good. So what we ask from our referees is technical assessment, that all these things basically listed, if the conclusions are experimentally supported, what's the general quality of the data, are there all proper controls included, what are the standards in the field, did they use the proper techniques to assess certain aspects of the study. And of course we ask for their editorial assessment. What is the advance of the study, and what would be the impact on the field of that study? So recently we have started this double-blind peer review at MPG and our journal in particular. Not all of them are, not all nature research, well, nature family journals are doing it. We are. So when you submit, at the point of submission, you will be asked if you want to opt in for a double-blind peer review, which means that we then need some extra work from you. You should remove, of course, the names of the authors from the cover page, and referrals, like as we shown in our previous studies, X does Y, that needs to get, needs to be changed, because that way you reveal your identity. If you really want to be anonymous, you have to rewrite your paper in a certain way. But many people actually opt in for this. Usually labs that are not well established, I think that they feel that their chances are increased if their identity is not known. And I have to say that it works pretty well. We haven't had any, I haven't heard any referee saying, I don't want to review this paper because it's that the author is an anonymous. No. And I've had personally several very good papers that were reviewed in this way, submitted as and reviewed as double-blind peer review. In my personal experience, they mostly come from Asia. I think people from Asia feel this bias that they perhaps do not do such stringent science. This is what I heard from China, for example. I'm not trying to be, and I know it's not true. We get really a lot of Chinese submissions, and we've published a lot of very good Chinese papers. But I'm just saying some communities perhaps feel this pressure that there is bias in their communities, so they prefer to submit this way. And in my personal experience, it works really well. If you don't want this, you just have to say no, and the referees will know who is behind your study. So decisions after review. This, I think, was supposed to go after this slide, so never mind. When we send your paper out for peer review and we get all the reports back, So we read them all, but we don't count votes. As I explained previously, some referees are there just because we want them to assess the technical parts of the paper. And if they say this study makes a huge impact in the field, well, we take that with a grain of salt because their field might not be cardiovascular, but something else. So I often get comments, why did you reject my paper? Because 2 out of 3 referees really like my study, and this referee who is negative is actually wrong, and stuff like that. But we base our decision on, we don't put equal weight on each and every report. So we usually have 1 or maybe 2 key referees in the trio, or maybe there will be 2 or 4. And that person has perhaps the best view of the field, of the community basically, and can tell us, not just the technical points of your paper, if the conclusions of your paper are supported by the data, but also the level of the advance and things like that. So the bottom line is we do not count votes. So 2 positive, 1 negative doesn't mean your paper we will continue with your paper, and the other way around. We can overrule reviewers, and we do that quite often. And our job is not just, to summarize the reports and to make a decision, okay, as I said, 2 were negative, 1 is positive, so that's, I think, a no. No, first of all, we know, we, as I said, put different weight to each report. And then we know the field, and we've been doing research for quite some time, so we all actually still know, the techniques and everything. So sometimes we know that referee perhaps is wrong. And in those cases, we consult with other referees if possible. We even include a new referee asking specific questions. So what do you think about this comment? Do you think it's justified? If you do, can you please explain why? And things like that. So again, if you do not hear back from us, and it's been 40 days since you submitted your paper, calm down. Contact the editor. We will try to explain what the situation is, but it might be complicated. We might be, and we don't really want to update you after each and every email because it may get confusing. So we are trying to figure out, what's the best way to proceed. So sometimes it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of thinking. And then, as I said, we are on 3 continents. We consult with each other. So when I consult with someone in London, that means that I won't get back from that person that day because I start my work day 6 hours later and they're already packing up to leave. So just to explain a little bit how we work, it's actually a lot of work behind the scenes that you probably don't know, but we work for you. If we send your paper out, that means we liked it. So there were reasons why we sent it out, and there were reasons why we would like to help you, make it better and make it actually right for our journal. Most papers, because of all this, require usually 2 to 3 rounds of review. I've heard people complaining that in other journals, like very high-profile journals, it takes even more than 2 to 3 rounds of review. I don't want to sound defensive, but I know Nature editors, and one thing that I really appreciate about them is their vision. Sometimes they send really, really preliminary works, but they feel that there is something there, and they send these preliminary works out. And after maybe a year or more, 5 rounds of review, they get really a study that's Nature quality. And some people perceive that as torture, but talking to these editors, I really don't think it is torture. I think that they actually have something, a luxury maybe, or gift that we perhaps don't have so much, and that is, a vision of the paper, where the paper can be, and what does it need to become a Nature study. So, as I said, after we receive the comments from the referees, we have to reach a decision, and there are several of them. So just to get you familiar with all the options we have, reject is the worst option for the authors. We can reject with an open door, saying that's what happened to our molecular cell paper. They told us, oh, we really like your study, but we are aware that it will take you some time to get there, to get to respond to all the criticism. So come back when you're ready. We'll be happy to look at it again, provided that someone else didn't actually publish something very similar to your study. So that's what we called OD, or open door. We might invite the revision, which is called P&Q. Don't ask me why. That means we would like to come back in 3 to 4 months with the revision. That's really good news. We are sort of more committed to publishing your paper. And rarely we actually accept a paper immediately. It did happen to me. I had one referee saying, I usually have a lot of comments, and I read this paper 3 times, and I can't find a single thing, to ask for. This is beautiful. Publish it as it is. So that happens rarely, but it happens. So when you get the comments, this is what we suggest you to do. Please don't get the criticism as an insult. It's actually really meant to improve your study. Be professional when you respond to this criticism. Most importantly, address all the criticism that you've got. So even if you disagree with the referee and you think that they were way off base, just explain why. And then we'll read that and use our own brain to understand. And then many times the authors are right. So just come down and explain why you think an experiment cannot be done, why you think the experiment is actually useless, why you think that the experiment would not add anything to what you have in your story. But respond to all the criticism, and respond in a professional way. On the other hand, if the experiments that are asked from you are really doable and important, do them. Just don't argue, don't rebut, just do them. Because and often we customize. That I do really often. Customize the decision letter, and I tell you, without X and Y, we would not reconsider your paper. So you have to do certain things to come back to us. Or if I think something is really not that important, and I would tell you that up front. Like if a referee says, proving the translational potential of this paper would be great by adding some human data, I might actually say, no, you don't really need any human data for us to continue. It would definitely increase the value of your paper, but editorially we think that would not be a prerequisite for further consideration of your study. So we do give you some guidance when we send the paper back to you, send the reports back to you. And as I said, we can overrule referees. And that can be tricky, so we also talk to them. And when everything works fine, we are all reasonable beings. So when everything works fine, they also learn where our bar is. So it's fine. But as I said, it's not just that we read the reports and then, okay, 2 plus is 1 minus, so we're gonna go on with this study. It's more complex. Most revisions are seen again by the referees, which means not all of them. When we get your point-by-point response, we read it, of course. And then if we told you you must do this and that, and you come back and you do not do it, but you don't really have any good excuse for not doing it, then we won't waste our referees' time by sending this back to them, because it's really a waste of their time. They told you to do certain things. We agree with them. We asked you to do these things. You come back and you say, well, my mice reproduce really poorly, so we could not do this. It's really bad, but we really need these things to proceed with your studies. So please complete, especially the experiments that we really, really care for. Or if you have any issues like that, I advise you to call the editor as soon as the issue arises. And then you can actually talk to the editor and see what can be done. Maybe an alternative can be found. Just talk to your editor, and don't be shy to email or call. I think that works really, really well. Not everyone knows that. When I was an author myself, I did not do that. So, as I said, when you respond to referees, don't take the criticism as an insult. It's an opportunity, actually, to improve your paper and to sometimes it's just to explain yourself better, because sometimes the referees or the editors didn't get it because it was not really explained well. Be professional. Do not insult the referees or the editors. That won't really get you far. Be persuasive and diplomatic, and if something was not understood, that means you need to rewrite it, because it was not understood because it was probably unclear. If you're unhappy with our decision, there is this thing called appeals. You can appeal to our editorial decision. We used to consider appeals only after the review process. Now we consider appeals also after first decision. So if we decided not to send your paper out for peer review and you think that was not justifiable, you can actually appeal to our decision, and then we will consider it again. We have to. That's your right to appeal, and it's our obligation to consider your paper again. And then you will get a really detailed explanation as to why we rejected your paper, if our letter was not clear enough, or we'll agree with you, perhaps we missed something, and then send it out. But most appeals actually come to us after the decision, after peer review. So in some cases, it's really reparable. Like the novelty is, the advance is really small, and there is no way that the referees will get more excited about your study, so that's sort of useless to appeal to. But in some cases, we reject papers because the list of the experiments suggested and that we think are important to be done is just too extensive. And it's sort of better for everyone involved. If you want this paper to be published fast, and you don't want to come back to us in a year because we think that the conditional mouse model would be really necessary to prove your point instead of a general knockout that you used in your study, then perhaps you would like to submit elsewhere rather than come back. But if you really want to come back, you can appeal, do the experiment first, and then make it easy for us. So just write a point-by-point response. We have to consider your appeal. So if you appeal to us, we will consider it. But in order to be successful, you should actually, okay, so I'm sorry. These are the reasons to appeal. If new data becomes available and you actually respond to all the criticism that you received, this is great. We really love that. And a lot of appeals actually come to us. We make it clear to our authors that, in some cases, we don't really see any way to go forward. So, but in many cases, we are clear. If you can actually provide these data, then we will be very happy to reconsider your paper. So this is rare, but it can happen if you think that the referee or referees or editor made a factual error, then that's a good reason to appeal. And if you have specific evidence of referee bias, that's also something that we have to consider. I have to say that these are very difficult to get, but in my career of 2.5 years as an editor, I have encountered a couple of them. These are really bad reasons to appeal. Scientific arguments, a decision based on judgments of novelty or importance are difficult, really difficult to overturn. So if the referees are not excited by your study, and there's really little that we can do. These are strategies, appeal strategies that are really unsuccessful, cosmetic changes. We get this a lot, really a lot. Do you know who I am? I mean, I've published this and that, and I've presented this work at this conference, and I get this great, response. It's not a good reason to appeal. Celebrity endorsement. My paper was read by a Nobel Prize winner, and this person told us that this paper is great. So in other words, you don't know what you're doing. So please, send your paper back to the referees. These are rare, but do happen. Usually not a good strategy. As well as this. I think this happens rather frequently, but that's also because people perhaps are not aware how fast the field moves. So if you tell me, why did you reject my paper? A similar study has been published in 2012, and they had exact same elements in my paper, in their paper. Well, that was 4 years ago, and the field actually had moved on. So, you know, now our bar is higher. We need more evidence. We need perhaps other techniques that are now gold standard and were not even there in 2012, stuff like that. We do get this as well because it's very easy when you're unhappy to blame someone for that, and you know we are actually the first person to blame. So can I have another editor to handle my paper because I was really unhappy with the decision? That's not going to happen. So be nice to your editor. And now we are at the acceptance stage. So your paper has been through all the review cycles, and everybody's happy saying this paper now can be published, and then we have to do something. So a nice thing about Nature Communications, we really don't care in which format you submit your paper. If you had it at Nature and it's a letter format, just submit it to us. I mean, we don't really care. We will care about the format at the accept stage, and then we will ask you to add certain things to reformat your paper in line with our journal standards, and that's what we call the acceptance in principle. We'll go through your paper, tell you what to do. It's quite simple if you follow it. I have AIP'd one paper 7 times, which is really annoying because we spend a lot of time instructing you what you need to change, and these are some, you know, changes like your abstract should be only 150 words and you should use present tense when you talk about your own results and stuff like that. So, you know, we actually give you a lot of guidance, a lot of help to put your manuscript in a shape that will be in line with our journal standards. So, after your paper is being accepted, sent to production, that takes a lot of time, and we're trying to get that down. It usually takes a month, which many people find a little bit too long. We're working on getting that reduced, especially because we are an online journal, and some of our competitors actually can put online the draft like 2 days after the paper is accepted. So we are aware of this issue, and we are working on it. But when your paper is finally published, it's really perfect. So that's why it takes a bit longer. At that point, we also can, we editors write press releases of papers. That's really fun and something that I really like. If you like writing, then you will have a chance to write a short article about papers that you published, and these short articles will be published on the Nature site. And the purpose is that the journalists, so people, laymen, so you write it really in plain, using plain words, not really scientifically heavy. So the way you would explain it to your friend who is not a scientist. So we tend to write these articles in that way. And then journalists pick them up, and you know, maybe it will end up. My personal success story was a BBC story on an article that I published. Actually was taken up by, I think, around 50 different news outlets. But you know, being someone who grew up with many scientific shows from BBC, that I consider that really like a highlight of my editorial career. So that's also something that we do, and it's also very nice for the authors. Your work gets more visibility. We also tweet about your papers. You know, we try to use social network to promote the papers. So that's also on you. You know, you should also do the same. It sort of increases the visibility of your study. Recently, we've started, at the beginning of this year, we started transparent peer review in our journal. It's a test. We just got, I was last week in London, and we had this big editorial meeting. All Nature Communications editors were there. So our executive editor told us that the success rate, well, actually the rate of people that opted in for this transparent peer review is 60%. It's quite successful, and we are planning to continue with it. What is it? We ask you if you want, along with your paper, your referee's comments to be published with your rebuttal, with your point-by-point response. And 60% of authors that submitted their papers in 2016 said yes. So that gives everyone basically a better view of what we do, or of what was the process of the peer review process, how it went. And you can actually get the taste of our involvement in this process as well, because there you will find also some details that you wouldn't normally know, how a certain paper was guided through, from the submission to the acceptance. This is something I would really like to talk to you about, and that's a transfer system that we have in our family of journals. So if you submit your paper to Nature Medicine because you thought it was a good fit, and the editor from Nature Medicine thinks your study is really good, but not really for them, they might consult with us. And of course, when you submit your paper, you will be asked if you want the other editors to be consulted. I think many people do not really know what that means. That doesn't mean we will breach any confidentiality. It means that if an editor, as I mentioned, in one journal thinks your study is really good, but it's not for them, it's clearly not for them, but it would be a good fit for another journal. So a Nature editor thinks it's a good fit in Nature Medicine, or Nature Medicine editor thinks it's a good fit for Nature Communications, they will talk to us, but we need your permission to do that. So I think that works really well. We usually have a short chat with the, I have several colleagues that work on cardiovascular in Nature Medicine. Those are the two journals that I collaborate mostly with. The same goes for Nature Biotechnology and etc. So we have this a consultation between different journals, and it's intended to save you time to find the best home for your paper. You can opt in or opt out at the submission, but if you opt in, there are several ways that your paper can be transferred. So sometimes the editors from a journal where your paper is being rejected think that your paper is a good fit for another journal, but they haven't consulted with the editors from their journal, and that's not committal PS. So they clearly say, we think that they might be interested, but we did not consult with them, so it might not happen. But usually the editors from different journals know the bar of other journals, so this usually works really well. This is something when an editor of a certain journal gets really excited about the study, but they know it's just not for them, and then they reach out to us and consult with us. And I really don't remember when I said no, because usually we get really good papers this way, and everyone's happy. This is, I think, even more useful, because if your paper has been reviewed in any Nature family journal and then rejected based on the reports, but again, the editor sees value in your study, say, you didn't decipher the mechanism well enough, and that's a must for Nature. But it's not going to be a problem for us, because with what you have in your paper, that's an immediate accept. So they send us, if you of course say yes to this consultation option, the editor in charge will send us all the comments, the paper, explain the situation. We will consult with each other, and in many cases we will invite the submission and say, we don't require any additional experiments, please tone down or change this or change that, and we will accept your paper in principle. Or we'll say, even though it would be great if you added X, Y, Z, we don't really need it to proceed, but we need you to do ABC. So when you transfer your paper, we will also instruct our referees, once you do the experiments required, that that's the only thing we care for. And as long as you do these experiments and they're technically sound, it's fine with us. So I think that's very useful and our authors actually like this, because it shortens the time. Your paper has been already reviewed. You don't really need to do anything but to click this button to transfer the paper to us. So that would be it. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, you can email me or talk to me today. This is my email, quite long, but what can I say? For those who are perhaps looking for a different career, we are hiring. As I said, we have to reach this magical number 100 editors. So, just keep a close eye on our ads. So, and apply if you're interested. I can tell you that the people that I work are really, really nice. And the journal is actually, we do work a lot. Don't expect 9 to 5. That's not going to happen. We travel a lot, but we really like each other and we like what we do. So if that sounds interesting, we have ads quite often. Thank you. Grazie.